Welcome back. Human trafficking and modern slavery are issues that often remain hidden in plain sight, affecting over 50 million people worldwide. One unique and visually striking project is turning sidewalks and landscapes into spaces of awareness and action using something as simple as grains of red sand. Joining us is the founder of the Red Sand Project. It is Molly Gochman. Molly, so nice to have you with us on the program.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you. Just tell us a little bit about what the Red Sand Project is, and then we'll get down into the nuts and gritty of it.
Red Sand Project is an activist artwork that invites people to fill sidewalk cracks with red sand, and in doing so, raise awareness about vulnerabilities that can lead to exploitation. So the cracks in the sidewalk serve as a metaphor for vulnerabilities that exist all around us. And when people think there's nothing they can do to address 50 million people being exploited today, they see that they can actually have transformative change by putting these little grains of sand in a sidewalk crack and transforming it. So it's that first step.
How did you come up with this idea? It seemed, I wouldn't have thought. Listen, I grew up in the Bronx. We used to talk about, break your back, step on a crack or something like that. But how did you come up with this concept? I was like, when I was reading about it, I was like, wow, so interesting. Where did it come from?
Well, in about 2011, 2012, I stopped making art and got deeply involved in anti-human trafficking work. And I was partnering with different organizations and meeting different individuals. And the need was to take the onus of raising awareness off of people with lived experience, because it's often re-traumatizing. So is there a way for allies to do the awareness raising in a way that isn't harmful, doesn't use people's names or stories, if they don't want those to be used? So I was asked to help raise awareness, and then I was asked to speak about my art at Art Basel, Miami. So I'm not really making art. I'm only doing anti-human trafficking work right now. But if you'll let me do a project related to that, then I'm in. And so I checked with different survivors and asked them if they like this idea of putting red sand in sidewalk cracks, and they did. And so I went forward with doing this for one weekend, thinking it would just be a 2-day project, and ended up, that I'm still doing it today.
Here you go. What did you hear about human trafficking that was so compelling that made you say, okay, we can talk about the artwork that you did beforehand, that I'm going to leave this to the side and get started in this? What was it that grabbed you that said, we got to deal with this?
Initially, it was an article that I read in the New York Times about a trafficking ring in Mexico that then led to North America. And then I started to learn all these other stories. And the work that I was highlighting when I did the initial Red Sand Project activation in Florida was with the coalition of Immokalee workers working to pick tomatoes in Florida, and they were asking for a penny more per pound. And so human trafficking shows up in every industry, and it's exploitation in different forms.
The term modern slavery has been used. It's used in some of your literature. Explain what that means. And of course, traditional American education would tell you, we know what happened with the Civil War, et cetera, et cetera. It took a little while, of course, to really weed it out, so to speak. But what is modern slavery, and how does it work, and why is it such an important issue, not only for you, but of course for everybody?
Well, there are different opinions on what terms to use. And in the UK, for example, they have the Modern Slavery Act. So for legal reasons, right, in the US, we use human trafficking. In other places, they might say modern slavery. It lands differently in the US to talk about modern slavery because of the deep history we have here and how that affects us currently so much. So what human trafficking is is getting services from someone, work from someone through force, fraud, or coercion. So that is the definition of human trafficking. Many people think it's just bringing someone across state lines, but it could happen within your neighborhood and often does, where you are forced to do work for the benefit of someone else through force, fraud, or coercion.
How did you come up with the notion of red sand? You know, again, when I read it and then I read what it was about, I was like, well, wait a minute, what is the connection? Why not a different color, a different form of expression? How did you come up with that?
I loved the way the red looked against the sidewalk, and you hear about trafficking happening in plain sight. Um, and the red was also the same color as the tomatoes that I was talking about that weekend, but it does make you stop. And out of all the colors, it really shows up the most distinctly. But different people read art differently. So some people see it as blood, some people see it as a stop sign. So I love for people to get what they want to get out of it and take it in the direction that they want to take it.
You know, I'm just thinking about it. I'm thinking about my suggestion of other colors. You're probably right. I mean, the sign behind me is in red. And certainly if you wanted to get people's attention. So let's just say somebody's walking down the block or on a sidewalk and they see it. You want them to ask the question, what is this about, right?
Precisely, because I was talking to the same people over and over again when we were doing awareness building in New York City. And I always had the same crowd show up. And by taking this onto the streets, you're able to have conversations with strangers because you look ridiculous. You're bending down, sidewalk cracks. Someone wants to know why you're doing it. It allows you to have a conversation with a stranger about something that you really care about and take it wherever that conversation, that connection takes it.
So you have done this. Now, of course, I'm a Bronx boy, and so I know about the borough of the Bronx, and our sidewalks are all apportioned accordingly. But you've actually taken this to other countries. It's not only the Bronx or New York City. This is a big thing.
In the first 2 years, I was just shipping it out whenever I had a request. So I didn't even realize that I'd shipped it to all 50 states and over 70 countries. And then I started to break down what the costs were, and it was much more difficult to ship it internationally. And in some countries, actually, they wouldn't even let it in. Like in Russia, there was a lot of demand for the red sand, and it never got through customs. So different countries had different challenges. Now I only send the sand out to groups doing the project. So initially I could send you one little bag, but now we found by interviewing people who'd done the project that they found that it was most effective when they did it with others. So we send groups, schools, organizations, a box of the sand, and then they control the project and design it in the way they want to
I
design
was
it.
going to ask you when you were talking about sending the sand and trying to get it through Russian customs. How much sand do you do? I mean, a big bag of sand, like a big bag, or is it like what is the normal kind of sharing size that's
Yeah.
involved?
A 10-pound box is a normal kind of sharing size,
10-pound box.
which is
Okay.
about,
Yeah.
11 inches by 11 inches.
All right. Now the stupid question of the day. Sand that I know of is generally tan or light brown or something. How do you turn that into red sand?
There's a place in Canada that has white feldspar sand, which is a very like pure sand, and they add pigment to it. So it's a safe sand that they can use on playgrounds and little kits for children. So it's a safe sand to use, and it's just a pigment that is used to color the different sands.
Do you have memorable moments of this project where I don't know, people have said, "Oh my goodness, what is this?" Or they said, "Oh, we get it." What are the things that stick out in your mind about this whole idea?
When a number of groups do the project together in one location, they have exchanges that they don't usually have because doing this kind of work, you're just putting out fires constantly. And they're able to pause and do the project in exchange, like, hey, I really need a social worker. I haven't even had a chance to interview. Does anyone know? Oh, you know what? Like, we're short beds. Does anyone have any idea for beds? And the YMCA might say, you know what? We do have beds on this occasion. This is how you find out when we have beds. So I love that kind of interaction. And then personal stories. Like, there was a woman I worked with who had been trafficked from her different foster families, and she took red sand back to a group home where she'd been trafficked out of, and she shared her story there, and I was able to be there with her. And she also made connections about how being like initiated into gangs had a lot of similarities to the sex trafficking that she was seeing happen. So I love when people are taking it and teaching new things and making new discoveries on how we can address this issue.
Uh, you raise an interesting point. Who are the people who say, yeah, send me, send me a 10-pound box of sand? Are they actually people who, had bad experiences, elected officials or other politicians and leaders? Who are the people that receive the sand and get the sand sent to them?
Initially, when I first started the project, I was sending little bags out to individuals who'd been trafficked and also organizations, small organizations. Now it's being sent primarily to schools. The Department of Health in the state of Tennessee has done the project for 3 years, which I hear is the only trafficking prevention strategy being applied by a Department of Health in the US. So, and it's being used in all the LA County schools at this time, I believe. So it's used in a lot of schools, and by nonprofits.
So,
A lot of indigenous nonprofits as well.
so when you say, like the LA schools, they actually have a project, and then they take the kids outside, for example, and they have them do the thing, striping the. I mean, it's incredibly out of the box thinking. So I'm just trying to get my own arms around it.
Yes.
But is that what happens, you think?
Yes, because I think that people. I was listening to one of the shows on BronxNet, and the first step is so necessary, and I think that people feeling like they can make a difference and seeing that happen and seeing that they can personally transform something is helpful. And how our memory works, I think being able to be active and taking participation and visually have this memory of changing something, and you're doing it in community with other people, so you have this shared memory, you have this shared experience. So I think that it works for learning, because it combines all of those.
Well, it certainly opens the door, just thinking from the classroom perspective, it certainly opens the door in a classroom that you say, hey, we're going to do this. And so then the kids go out and they have a little fun and they put the sand down. But it really opens the door to have a dialogue. I mean, there's no question about it. Why are we doing this? And that kind of activity, of course, for children is vital.
Absolutely. And the dialogue around what are the vulnerabilities that lead to exploitation, because often people feel like it's them, that they did something to lead to them being in this situation. And for it to be, no, there are these vulnerabilities. There's lack of access to mental health. There's lack of access to, you know, financial opportunities. So what are the vulnerabilities that are leading to this situation? So it isn't something that's felt on the inside, that you realize that society is responsible.
Let's just talk about actually doing this, because part of the agenda for you in joining us is to spread the word, so to speak. So the first thing you do is you get people and supplies. Like if you want to do this in your own community or in your school, if you're a teacher or whomever, the first step is doing what?
Go to redsandproject.org and they'll lead you through the steps to fill out a form, request the sand. We love when people are able to pay for shipping. We never charge shipping to indigenous organizations. But if you're unable to pay for shipping, let us know.
Okay, and then you'll get you'll get some sand, right?
Yes.
I would think, again, I'm just imagining this, that there needs to be an educational aspect of it. So we got
Yes.
the sand, then do you give instructions on how to explain it or those kinds of things?
Oh, I'm looking. I don't actually have a card on me, but yeah, I have a card that says how to do it. We have little bags that explain that there are 50 million people being trafficked today, and that you can make a difference. So you get these tools, and you can create your own toolkits, and or create a bowl or some kind of container with scoops where people can go back and scoop it out. So there are different ways to do it. And we also send a resource guide with the sand.
I was going to ask that. The process actually is you get a big bucket or something, and then people scoop it out. And then again, we all know what sidewalk cracks look like. And then you fill them in very neatly, or do you kind of let people know that you've done this? Put a flag in it. I mean, what does it actually look like, and what do you do?
Everyone has their own style and
Oh,
flavor.
okay.
So some people take chalk, which is very effective, and they write hashtag Red Sand Project on it. It is very helpful when people hashtag it because it is about building community and bringing us together. And when you hashtag it, then you're connecting with other people who care about human trafficking, connecting with other organizations. So it is helpful when you hashtag it. So when people take sidewalk chalk and actually write hashtag Red Sand Project or write what they're thinking about it, the names of their organizations, facts that they're reading in the resource guide, that's very helpful. And you will see when a big group does it that the entire block is transformed. When you look back
Yeah,
at the
that's what I was going to ask you about. So do you do it, with a couple of sidewalk cracks in front of your building? Do you pick a place that's strategic? I mean, how do you choose? Okay, so I've got a school, my kids are ready to do it. We're going to teach this thing. How do we choose where we want to do it?
often it's done right outside of the school,
Outside
but it is strategically done. There's a survivor I know who took it back to the place where she was trafficked and did it there. Some people do it in more public parks. And so you choose. You really have
You can
all
choose,
better
but
company.
you should really look for sidewalks that otherwise you didn't want to step on the crack. And how much sand? Like how many stripes does that 10-pound go for?
So many, like that 10
So
pounds
many.
goes very far. So you can
It's
use that
tremendous.
and then give it to someone else. Honestly, a little bit of sand goes very far. So even if there's a tiny bag with a couple ounces of sand, that can last you quite a while if it's one person doing the cracks in many places.
Do you have
I'd
people?
be surprised.
Do you have people who like really organize, a sand project in their community? I would think, since you've been doing this for a while, that you do. You do have people who do this.
Yes, we do.
And in terms of local, are there any projects like this in New York City that we know of? Or can we be the first, as we're in the Bronx, we're the first in everything, but can we be the first to do this in New York City? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, do it in New York City. You won't be the first, but
We
I
won't
would.
be the first.
Being the first doesn't matter. It's about you taking the first step, right? You don't need to be the first to do it, but our individual first steps.
And then after that, and again, using school groups as an example, after that, then it comes time to either before or after, you got to share what you've done. You got to, I don't know, through social media or otherwise tell people what you've done, right? Is that like what do you advise after you've done it so that it has as much impact as possible?
I think hashtagging Red Sand Project, going to social media, that will give it more impact.
That is certainly a good way to do it. Why does this matter? I mean, do you find that, do you think it's had effect other than an expression of dissatisfaction with the conditions that lead to this kind of trafficking?
Because it starts conversations. It starts conversations in public. I installed a sculpture yesterday related to another project, and we say statues can lead to statutes, right? Like what we do in public spaces and what we talk about and convene about does make a difference. And so I think just having that conversation, and if you're having the conversation in schools, um, excellent. That's a huge network that you're impacting. And then, if you're having that conversation with the whole Department of Health, huge network that you're impacting, because it does help us unravel what are the vulnerabilities that lead to exploitation and what are the things you can address. 2/3 of the kids sold for sex in the US have a history in the child welfare system, right? What can we do to address the child welfare system and have conversations around that?
I want to go back to how we started the conversation. You said that you were an artist. The value of art, and we know this in the Bronx, certainly the value of art and music that has continues to transform our culture in the borough of the Bronx, and of course the music we've created is all over the world.
Amazing.
What is the effect, and what why does the Red Sand Project matter, and the use of artwork to talk about this very difficult thing that doesn't get talked about enough?
There's a Rebecca Solnit quote that I'm going to paraphrase, that I've been thinking about this week. And the stars are a given, but we build the constellations. And I think building those constellations, building those connections matters within the Bronx, within your neighborhood, like what you're doing with BronxNet, that matters within New York City and beyond that. So doing the project helps form those connections, and art forms those connections. We come together to talk about one thing, and I can say, hey, different people have different reasons why the sand is red for them. But to talk about that brings us closer together. It makes us realize our humanity to one another. And that is essential.
Did you ever, I'm just curious about this, did you ever go somewhere and just were walking down a street and said, oh, wow, look at this. This is where, like, well, look at this, that kind of thing. Has that happened? You're smiling, so I think maybe it did.
It has, but as
Wow.
impactful as that is for me, it was more impactful when it happened to one of my kids. Or, like my niece who was like, who's my aunt? Like whatever. Found it at one of her friends' houses and was like, oh, that's cool.
Wow, that must have been actually incredibly exciting.
It was.
What do we tell people right now? What's the bottom line here? Get in touch with us and think about where you want to do it. I mean, school teachers especially, just make the pitch. I'm ready. I'm ready to let you make the pitch.
Anyone can do it. Anyone can form a group to do it together. You can do this as a community activation to bring you outside and closer together with your community. So go to redsandproject.org and fill out the short form, and we will send you sand, and you can choose when to do it and how and where.
Right, and the sand is free. If you can pay for the shipping, that certainly would make a lot of sense. I got to ask you this because, as a New York City person, you think everything is regulated. Is there a sanitation issue? Like, will people say, hey, you're dropping garbage around or something of that nature?
Yeah. No, there isn't an issue. I'm actually looking at using a different colored sand for a project in Ukraine right now, and was looking into the sewage system. There are no issues with using this sand.
Sand, especially because you don't use that many. The other thing I have just been thinking about as we're talking, I'm thinking about all these aspects of it. I guess you really like sunny weather. I mean, here's to sunny days, because one rainy day could kind of, disrupt the proceedings, so to speak.
Absolutely. And you see how all of that is connected, right? The exploitation of the climate is connected to exploitation of people. And that's also, shows up on the sidewalk cracks and what happens with the sand. We're seeing how all of these things are inseparable in different ways.
Well, do you have a future either project? Now, you mentioned Ukraine. I mean, we could spend a long time talking about that issue. But do you have either other related projects like this, or is this, you as an artist, a stepping point for you to now create something else?
I do have other projects related to this. I'm creating a series called Monuments to Motherhood, and it's Monuments to Caregiving. And I think, we can talk about the exploitation and the harm, but what is the remedy for that? The remedy for that is caring. And how can we show up in a caring capacity for others and mother ourselves, our community, our land? So I have a podcast called Monuments to Motherhood. I installed a sculpture at Grand Army Plaza this week that opens on May 11th from 12 to 4 called Monuments to Motherhood.
Oh, that's wonderful. And what is that? Just out of curiosity, I realize it's in another borough. We do like Brooklyn. We accept them anyway. What does that look like over at
I would
Grand?
love to have a sculpture in the Bronx.
It's what? Say that again.
I would love to have a sculpture in the Bronx.
Come on down. Who would say no?
We'll work on it.
Who
That
would
would be
say no?
amazing.
Who would say no? So that's March 11th. It opens up, and for people who want to travel to Brooklyn or going to be in Brooklyn, when can they see it and where can they see it?
They can see it starting now. The opening is May 11th from 12 to 4 on Mother's Day, but it will be there for the next year at the Grand Army Plaza entrance to Prospect Park.
Right.
And it's a reminder that we can show up with care, and that is something that we can do on a daily basis to have an impact.
Well, how do I help you get a statue or something of that would work for you in the Bronx?
Oh, please send me at hello@mollygochman.com any ideas for spaces that you have in the Bronx for sculpture. And I will apply and see if you like what I have to offer. And if not, maybe you'll like what another artist
We have space. We have space for social justice and anti-violence in the Bronx all over the borough because that's what we're all about. So Molly, thank you so much for joining us again. RedSandProject.org. That's
Yes.
what you got to do, and then you can be in touch with Molly and everything else. Listen, you're great. You're great, and I love the idea of artwork and using that to tell a story. It's how we have communicated for generations here in the borough of the Bronx, and of course all over the world. You really, I love people who think outside the box. Molly Gochman, the founder of the Red Sand Project. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gary. I really appreciate being here with you.